Hi, guys. Welcome back to the Surviving Siblings podcast. Today, I have an incredible surviving sibling with me. We have Tommy here today with us. Tommy, welcome to the show.
Hi, Maya. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. So, today, Tommy's going to be sharing a story about his personal journey, but also about losing two of his brothers. So, Tommy, before we go into how you lost your brothers, tell us a little bit about your background, where you guys grew up, family dynamics. Share with us so we can know a little more about you.
Okay, once again, thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate the opportunity. We're a native New York family. I was born and raised in New York City. Me, my parents, my twin brother, Tim, my older brother, John, and my older sister, Mary. So there were four of us in the family, and we grew up in Queens, New York, as you can tell by my accent.
I was going to say, where's that accent from, Tommy? Yep.
So it was a fairly typical upbringing growing up in Queens. My father was a blue collar worker. Originally, he was a salesman in Manhattan. But let me just preface my family story by just stating that addiction has run rampant through my family. And it started with my father. Okay. He was a great guy, but he had a bad case of alcoholism. Okay. And my mother as well. But they were really actually very good parents. They suffered from addiction. So that began early on. But my father was a cab driver, then he was a bartender, then he was a salesman, and he bounced around from job to job. But he always provided for the family. He was a good provider. There was there was chaos in the family at times due to my father's drinking, and there was I had a lot of fear growing up, anxiety based around the house and the instability in my house and not knowing what kind of condition my father was going to be in when he came home from work. So that made my childhood a little bit uncomfortable to say the least. So, but my older brother John, he was my he was my idol. I looked up to him. He was my big brother. Anything he did, I would try to do myself. And my brother John was 7 years older than me. So me and my twin brother Tim really looked up to him as our role model. So also in the house at the time was my aunt. My mother's sister lived with us her whole life, my aunt Angela. So she lived in the house with us, and she had her own battles with addiction and mental health. But altogether, it was a loving home, in spite of the dysfunction that was present in the house. So yeah, I played sports as a kid, me and my brothers. My father was the coach of our sports teams, and it was fun. And we went to school and we hung out after school. And up until my early teenage years, it was aside from my father's drinking, it was a fairly normal childhood, I would say, looking back. But around actually 13, I think, I started to drink. I picked up my first drink around 13.
That's young, Tommy.
So
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, well, the guys in my neighborhood, looking back, it wasn't really that young. Everybody was doing it, you
Right.
know.
So it would seem normal. Hmm.
Yeah, and besides that, my father was in the bar business, so I was hanging out in a bar already, and I was only 13.
Hmm.
So, and my older brother John was hanging out there, and he was drinking and stuff like that. And I discovered that alcohol took away a lot of negative feelings I had about myself, anxiety, fear, worry. And when I started drinking, I realized, wow, alcohol takes all that negative emotion away. So I knew I would keep doing it. I really knew I would keep doing it. Now, keeping in mind, you know, I knew my father had a serious problem with alcohol. So I remember saying to myself, well, I shouldn't drink too much because I might get into trouble, you
Hmm.
know? But anyway, at the same time, my brother John, like I said, he was 7 years older, and he started drinking heavily. And his progression with addiction, it was slow but steady. Okay, and as well as myself. By the time I was 16, I was drinking every day, getting into little minor scrapes and trouble here and there, but nothing too crazy. But my brother John, what happened to him was that he was in the construction trade. So he worked in Manhattan on skyscrapers doing construction, and he got hurt in early 1985. He got hurt on the job. Let's see, John was 25 at the time.
Okay.
I was 18.
Yeah.
So now here, let me just throw in an important part of the story. I stopped drinking around 18 years old because I
Wow.
knew I was in big trouble, and I managed to stop on my own without going to rehab or treatment of any kind. I just stopped. And amazingly enough, I stayed stopped for several months. And it was during that time my brother John got hurt at work, and he was prescribed pain medication. Okay. So, which, that was nothing new. I mean, unfortunately, pills in my family were just a way of life. My parents were on medications for anxiety and depression and things like that. So I didn't think it was a big deal, but I noticed that my brother was becoming addicted to these pills, okay? And and he started to change, and he didn't look healthy, and he wasn't going to work, and his drinking got heavier and heavier. So what happened to my brother John in June of 1985, he ran out of like prescription pain medication. And by
What was
this
he
time he
taking,
had,
Tommy? If
I'm
you
sorry,
wouldn't mind what was he taking exactly? Do you remember what he was prescribed?
he was probably taking something called Vicodin or hydrocodone at the
Right.
time.
Right. Which is
It's a,
intense. Yeah. Those are
it's
intense
a
pills. Yeah.
powerful opiate. But then we found out that, my brother was hanging out with local drug dealers in the neighborhood, which he had never done before.
Hmm.
And so we figured out, well, he's getting pills off people in the street. So his progression with his addiction was very quick. And he was hanging out with very bad people in the neighborhood. Now, being an 18-year-old kid, I didn't know how to approach him and say, listen, what are you doing? This is not good. This is, our family didn't know how to approach him to confront him.
Right. Because was
Right?
he living away? Were you still at home with your parents and was he
Yeah,
living
we were all
away?
still living in the same
Oh,
house.
you are all living in the same. Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we were
Hmm.
all still in the same house. My two
Hmm.
brothers, the only one that wasn't there was my older sister.
Okay.
But me, my twin brother, and my brother John were still in the house. So we're watching my brother John just progress, and he's getting worse and worse. And we tried to talk to him, but he didn't want to hear it. He told us he was okay, and he needs these pills for the pain that he's in, and it's going to be all right. And he told us not to worry. So we just let him do his thing, okay? Until one day, that day was June 9th, 1985. Somebody came to my house and told us my brother John was in the street, and he was basically unconscious in the street near our house. So me and my father went to get him, and we picked him up and we helped him back home. Okay. He was in very bad shape this day. He was very just, I didn't know how bad he was that day, but I knew that we had to get him home and put him to bed, and hopefully he would sleep it off.
Many surviving siblings have lost a sibling to addiction. So I want to take a moment to share an incredible resource with you that may help you or someone you love that is struggling with addiction. It's called Sober Companion Los Angeles. Their founder, Tommy McAlladin, has over 31 years of recovery himself and has been helping families since 2010. With his team and a nationwide network of clinicians, Tommy brings guidance, compassion, and real support when families need it most. Addiction can be treated, and recovery can be possible. Sober Companion Los Angeles will even travel anywhere in the country, and internationally to help families in need. If this speaks to you, please take the first step and visit sobercompanionlosangeles.com for more information.
So people called us, and me and my father went to get him. We brought him home, and we helped him into bed, which we had done many times before that. And when we put him into bed, and maybe an hour or so later, I went back into the bedroom, and my brother was dead. He had asphyxiated. He died from an overdose. Okay. He
Wow.
fell asleep on his back, and he got sick, and he died. And
Mhm.
I found him dead in our bedroom that day. So I ran outside. I got my father. I got my twin brother. We tried to do CPR. We tried to do whatever we could to help him. We called 911. An ambulance came, but he could not be saved. He was dead. And I'll never forget what he looked like that day. I mean, that was 40 years ago, but it still seems like yesterday. It was a devastating blow to my family. Uh, my parents were never quite the same after that. They had a lot of guilt. I had a lot of guilt. I kept saying I should have taken him to a hospital that day. He would still be here. And I carried guilt for many years. And 2 days after my brother died, my Aunt Angela, who, as I mentioned earlier, she lived with us her whole life. She was like our second mom.
Mhm.
And 2 days after John died, my Aunt Angela took her life. She was so distraught. She couldn't deal with my brother's death, and she she committed suicide. So the summer of 1985 was incredibly traumatic and sad.
Well, she
And
probably felt like you guys were her kids. She was
yeah,
your she was your
yeah,
second mom, right? And
yeah, she
so
was
I'm
like our
sure that
second
was
mom.
right.
So yeah, the day we buried my brother John, we had to go to my Aunt Angela's wake, and it was just terrible.
So
But here's the
wait, walk
thing, yeah,
hang on, Tommy. Let walk us through that because wow. This is a very intense summer for you. You're an 18-year-old kid, basically. And like,
yeah,
I mean, I don't know. I think anyone under 25 is a kid these days. Looking back on life, you're like, oh my gosh, like we were kids. So yeah. So your brother passes. This is extremely traumatic because you go in the street with your father, you see him and you find him. And
mhm,
I mean, that's a lot. And then your aunt, who's been like a second mother to you. I mean, that's a lot. So you have your brothers, you have a wake for your brother and then a funeral and then you've got Aunt Angela too. So it's like back to walk us
yeah,
through what that was like real quick if you don't
right.
mind. Yeah.
Well, yeah, my brother's funeral was incredibly sad. All his friends were there, all young. He was only 25 years old, and he was very popular. He had a lot of friends. He wasn't a mean guy. He was a big, strong guy, but he was a sweetheart. He was a sweetheart. And he just, for whatever reason, I don't know why that had to happen to him. I still don't understand. But, my family was able to show up and have a funeral and a burial for him. And it all seemed surreal to me. And my father kept saying that, you know, John's going to wake up. He's going to be okay. This is not real. He had denial. And yeah, the day we buried my brother, we had to go to Aunt Angela's wake. And that was equally sad and traumatic. The whole family was just all my cousins and my aunts and uncles. Everybody was like, they couldn't believe that it was happening, back to
Right.
back tragic deaths like that. So amazingly enough, I got through it. I mean, semi reasonably sane, if that's the right word to use.
And you
But
were sober. You
well, I
had stopped
wasn't.
drinking.
Well, actually, I started drinking again after my brother's death.
That's
Yeah,
why I wanted to ask you that. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
I
Mhm.
I I really lost hope. I was
Mhm.
really angry, and I had tremendous amounts of grief, and I don't know how to deal with that. So I started drinking again after my brother John died.
Yeah.
So yeah, my drinking career just got worse after that. And my father and my mom, I mean, it was tough on me, but I can't imagine what they were going through at the time to lose their oldest son, in such a tragic way. My mom never was the same. She wound up in and out of psychiatric wards after my brother died. She had a breakdown, and it was very sad. And so, and then me and my brother Tim, my twin brother, we did our best to support each other through that because my older sister was out of the house and she was married and she had a young child. And so me and my twin brother Tim were there for each other to try and support each other. And, you know, our protector was gone. Our older brother John was gone. He was our protector. I mean, we loved our father, but we treated my brother John like he was our protector, and now he wasn't there, and it left a tremendous gap and a tremendous hole in us, which is still there today to a certain extent, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, it's very special to have a twin too. And
Oh, yeah.
there's a lot of siblings that listen to this show, Tommy, and as you know, because we met on TikTok, a lot of twins on TikTok, and it's a
Mm,
very unique relationship. And so I think only another twin can connect with that, right? And so I love that you're sharing how you and Tim were like, okay, it's kind of us against the world at this point
mm,
because we've gone through these, we've lost our big brother slash dad role model, and we've
yeah.
also lost Aunt Angela. I mean, that is so quick and fast and traumatic, both of those losses. So did you feel like, it was that you guys against the world, and did you feel like it bonded you and Tim even more together? I mean, as twins, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a bond in itself right there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, as a twin, I mean, obviously, we were always together ever since we were babies,
Right.
obviously.
Right.
And
Even
we
in the
didn't,
womb you were together.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that bond just got stronger after my brother John passed away.
Mhm.
So we had to hold each other up. My parents did their best to support us, but they were going through their own grief and their own issues. And so me and Tim really supported each other, even more so than we ever did before. And I mean, and then the story with my brother Tim, if you want me to go into that, I could start talking about that as well.
Of course.
So yeah, I was 10 minutes older than my brother, which is a long time in the twin world.
Oh, I've learned that. I've learned that talking to twins and having twins in this community, like 10 minutes. I mean, they're usually like, I'm 60 seconds or
Yeah.
I'm a minute or
The
2 minutes.
average one is
10
like
minutes
two
is a big
minutes.
deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, so my brother Tim, first of all, my mother always said we were identical, but I really don't think we were because my brother Tim was a redhead and I had brown hair
Mhm,
and our faces were kind of different. You could definitely tell us apart. You knew we were brothers, but we didn't really look like twins, to be honest. But we
mhm.
were, and it was great having a twin. I mean, it's like having a best buddy all the time with you. Yeah, and we just did everything together, which included some behaviors that were not so good for us.
Of
Okay.
course.
As I mentioned earlier, when I started drinking in my teens, my brother Tim was drinking with me because we always hung out together. And we both developed alcoholism from a fairly young age, as I mentioned earlier. And, we would even try to support each other through that. When something bad would happen as a result of our drinking, like for instance, I got arrested in 1987 in New York City. I went out one night and I had too much to drink and I got into a fight with a cab driver in New York City and I got arrested. And my twin brother Tim came to the courthouse with my father to get me out of jail. And, you know, and we try to help each other find better jobs or whatever we were going through, stuff like that. Eventually, we both landed very good union jobs with New York City, and we did very well at those careers. Okay, but drinking was always present; it wasn't going away.
Mhm.
So eventually, I got sober in 1994 when I was 28, and by that time, I had realized that if I didn't quit drinking, I was going to wind up either dead or locked up somewhere for a long time because I realized I was an alcoholic and I needed to get sober. So I quit drinking in 1994.
Was there
And my,
something specific that happened though, Tommy? I always ask people this when I have a story like this, right? And someone's sharing so openly. And I think you guys are going to hear as we progress in this story the wonderful things you've done in this community, Tommy. But like, I always want to kind of dial into that moment because I think these are, I mean, 31 years of sobriety is, I mean, is a big, big milestone and it's something to be celebrated. But I always want to know, like, what was that moment for you? Because you shared with us when you were 18, like, you were like, oh my God, I'm going to be like, maybe like my parents, or like, I can see this getting me into trouble. And like, I see that as an 18-year-old perspective, right? And like, you were like, but then when your brother and your Aunt Angela died so tragically, I completely understand why you started drinking again, right? Because you knew that would short term solution to numb pain, anxiety, all of that.
yeah.
But to go at 28 and realize I'm going to die. This is like what happened in that moment to inspire you to say enough. And then 31 years later, you're here. Like, that's impressive.
First of all, thank you for that. Let me just say that that arrest I had in 1987 turned into a very serious felony case. And I wound up doing 5 years probation with New York State. And that probation period ended in 1993. So I still continued to drink until 1994. Now, at the end of my drinking, remember, I still had this very good union job in New York City. And I would use that as an excuse to say, well, how can I really be an alcoholic if I got this good job? You know, but I was living in a furnished room in Queens, New York at the end, a really depressing place.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a desire to quit drinking, but I was very afraid to live life sober because I had never done it. Now, there wasn't a specific event that happened in 1994 that made me want to quit drinking. I just realized that I was at a jumping off place, okay? That I was going to, like I said, eventually die from drinking because at the time, I was 130 pounds.
Wow.
I weigh 180 now. Imagine, I mean, I was in bad shape physically.
You were teeny tiny. Whoa.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
very skinny. Sometimes I still think I wish I was, but anyway. So my body was failing. I was in bad shape medically, physically. So that motivated me to quit drinking. Now, I had been to 12-step groups before, and I'm fairly certain your audience knows what I'm talking about when I say 12-step groups. So
I'm
I'd
sure
been
they
to
do.
those meetings before,
Hmm.
and I knew there was a place to go to that would accept me and help me. Okay. So that day, my last drink was May 28th, 1994. That day, I decided to go back to those groups because I knew that they would help me there. I had a little bit of hope and a lot of willingness to go back to meetings and try to get sober again. Okay. And also, I mean, the day of my last drink, I was so depressed and so unhappy that if I had means to hurt myself, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I really think I would have done something to hurt myself.
Hmm.
And I'm so grateful that there wasn't a way to do that at the time. So I went back to 12 step groups the next day, basically took directions from people there. And in the blink of an eye, 30 years have gone by. And I'm very happy now
Yeah.
with my sobriety. But, you know, my twin brother Tim, suffered for many years with his alcoholism.
So
Uh,
this is where the twin experience is a perfect direction to go down this because he didn't get sober.
no,
So
I,
what was that like for your relationship? Yeah, I mean, you were diving into it perfectly. What was that like? Because you make this big life change and he doesn't get sober. And so walk us through this. What was this like?
Well, Tim was incredibly supportive of me. Okay. Let me just say that. But at the time when I got sober, my twin brother got married. He had a baby at home in 1994. So he had his own family life stuff going on. Okay. And we didn't live in the same area anymore. He lived in Long Island, New York, and I lived in Queens. So we did kind of drift apart, which was uncomfortable. I mean, I was so used to having him close by me all the time. But life progresses, and he got married. He had a couple of kids, and that took up all his time. So he was happy that I was getting sober. He really was. And when I made 1 year sober, my brother Tim came to my anniversary. My father came. Unfortunately, my mother passed away during my first year of sobriety, but my mother did see me get sober for 5 months before she passed. So I'm grateful for that. But yeah, me and my twin, we kind of grew apart to a certain extent. But then we would come back together all the time because we would just miss each other, you
Yeah.
know. And there's always that special bond that we had that we would have to see each other periodically. And plus I loved my nieces and nephews, and I would go see them and spend time with them. But my twin brother's drinking was really getting out of control. And he made attempts to quit drinking in the 1990s, but he could never stay stopped. He always went back to drinking. Yeah, he had a bad case of alcoholism. But what happened was in 2000, Tim went to a detox for the first time, and he tried to get sober, and he stayed sober a couple of months, but then he went back to drinking again. Now, my brother worked for an organization called Con Edison in New York City. So what happened in 2001, everybody knows what happened on September 11th.
We do. Hmm.
So that was a tragic, horrifying day in New York City. And my brother went down to ground zero the day after 9/11
Wow.
as a first responder to try to restore power to lower Manhattan. So he went down there with Con Edison. And my brother Tim spent months down at ground zero working around, 16-hour shifts. And I have pictures of him working in the basements of the World Trade Center with all these construction workers and firefighters and police officers. And it was a tough time. It was a tough time. But eventually, that job ended and New York City came back to normal somewhat after that tragedy. But my brother's drinking was never really getting better after that. And he made other attempts to quit drinking over the years and nothing ever stuck. So what happened in 2019, my brother Tim was in trouble again with drinking, and he checked himself into a detox in New York City, which my family had seen him do that many times. So we weren't really too confident that he was going to stay stopped this time. But my brother came home from detox. He joined a 12-step recovery group. He made friends there. he he took all the suggestions that people talk about when you go to that fellowship, and he did a dramatic turnaround. And I stayed out of it. I wanted to help him.
Why do you think you stayed out of it? Why? Like, what was, I think this is an important part of your story. Like,
I look back to what happened to my brother John, and I didn't step in to help him, and eventually he died. So I wanted to jump in and help my brother Tim, okay? But he told me, Tommy, I need to do this on my own. I was sober 20, wow, I was sober 25 years at the time. But Tim told me, Tommy, I need to do this on my own. And I stayed out of it. I stayed out of it. And he did great. Tim did great. He was so happy not drinking. It was quite miraculous to see, to be honest, really. And it was humbling when he told me to stay away, like don't jump in and help him. It was humbling for me to hear that because I figured, well, I got all this sober time now. Now I could get my brother sober, and he
Right.
told me that he could do it on. He was going to help other. He was going to ask other people for help.
Hmm.
Okay, so yeah, Tim was doing very well, and then COVID hit. So Tim quit drinking in November 2019. The COVID lockdown happened in New York City in March of 2020. So during the lockdown, I mean, you couldn't go out. You couldn't do anything. You couldn't go to the hospital. You couldn't go to anywhere. And let me just back up a little bit. In late 2018, Tim got diagnosed with a 9/11 cancer. In late 2018. So he had Merkel cell carcinoma from exposure at the World Trade Center. But he got treated with he went to see a doctor and they did radiation. And in early 2019, he was given a clean bill of health. Okay. And he joined the 9/11 fund and they covered all his medical expenses. And the 9/11 fund is an incredible organization. The Tunnel to Towers Foundation is an incredible organization in New York City that helps first responders even today. And I strongly support people. I ask people to support the 9/11 Fund and the Tunnel to Towers organization. But like I said, during the lockdown, Tim started experiencing symptoms of again of his cancer, and he wasn't able to see his doctor because of the COVID lockdown. So Tim, during the summer of 2020, was gradually getting sicker and sicker, and we all thought that it was probably the 9/11 cancer coming back, but we didn't want to face it. It was too scary to talk about. But it got to the point where he was so sick, we told him, you have to go to the hospital.
Hmm.
So I took Tim to the hospital in September of 2020. He was not doing well. He was in the hospital a couple of days. They weren't quite sure what was going on with him. We told the doctor about his 9/11 diagnosis. A few days after that, they told us that the cancer had returned, the cancer had metastasized, and it was incredibly the worst diagnosis that they could give us.
So it was very
Right.
aggressive, Tommy.
Yes,
Yeah.
it had spread to many parts of his body. Okay. So my brother went into the hospital September 24th of 2020, and he just every day he just got sicker and sicker, and then we had to tell him the truth that the cancer was back. And I think he I think he knew because he would tell me, Tommy, I'm scared. I'm scared. I don't know what's going to happen. And I kept telling him, Tim, it's going to be okay. I didn't know what else to tell him,
Yeah.
you know. So he went into the hospital September 24th, October 13th. 19 days later, Tim fell into a coma. But earlier that day, the doctors told us that he was going to pass away within a day or two. I don't know how the doctors knew that, but that's what they told us.
Hmm.
So I started making phone calls to my relatives and to Tim's childhood friends, and everybody started coming to the hospital basically to say goodbye to him because he was still awake at this time. On October 12th, he was still awake. So his friends were coming by to say goodbye, and I look back on that, and it's just I don't know how he had the courage to get through that. It was He knew what was happening. He knew he was dying,
Right.
but he faced it with courage. He really did. And his kids came by the next day. I saw Tim for the last time on October 13th. He told me never to forget about him. And I promised him I promised him I never would. And that night he fell into a coma. And the next morning we went back to the hospital. He was in intensive care, hooked up to a ventilator. And we decided with my niece and nephew, we decided not to let him stay like that. So we decided to let him pass away. So I held his hand, and with his kids, and his kids were holding his hand, and we took him off the life support, and he passed within a minute. He was 54 years old, and he was sober 11 months when he died.
That's
He,
amazing.
I'm grateful he did experience 11 months of sobriety before he passed.
Hmm.
I cried my eyes out for weeks after that, and I still do. I mean, it's just really sad.
Well, that's your person. I mean,
Yeah,
twins, you have a
yeah,
special bond. It's
yeah,
like, it's a very, very special bond.
yeah,
And I'm, like you mentioned, I'm sure you were just so proud of him for being able to experience life sober. And I
yeah.
mean, all the things he did in 9/11 too are just incredible. And it's so unfortunate that that's a part of how he passed. But the twin bond is just, I mean, your story is a testament like how special it is. Yeah.
And I kept telling him, because we were talking about my brother John in the last few days of Tim's life at the hospital, and he kept talking about my brother John and my Aunt Angela, and he said, Tommy, I'm probably going to see them in a few days. And I said, well, if you do, just please tell them that we all love them and we miss them, you know?
Mhm.
So, yeah, my brother is interred with my brother John and my parents. And my Aunt Angela is in the same cemetery a little bit further away. But yeah, I know my story is not unique, but it's my story. And as I said earlier, I'm still quite amazed that I've come through all this trauma and loss relatively sane, you know,
And
uh,
still sober.
and
That's
still sober.
amazing.
Yeah. And and I try to help other people as much as I can, that's my career now. I help people suffering from addiction issues.
Let's talk about this, Tommy. It's a great transition into this. So let's talk
Yeah,
about this. Let's talk about what you're doing. Tell us a little bit about your organization and what you guys do, because we're so excited to be partnered with you guys on this, because the amount of siblings that you guys listen that have lost a sibling to addiction, and some of you guys are struggling with it yourself. So let's talk, yeah, dive into this.
yeah,
Share a little bit about how you started this and tell us about your
yeah,
organization.
yeah. Thank you. Well, the organization is called Sober Companion Los Angeles. Basically, it's an addiction treatment company. And I started my company back in 2014 as a way to give back and to help other families that suffer from addiction or mental health crises and things like that. I retired from my regular union job, and then I started my own company with this addiction treatment service. So basically, what we do is we're available nationwide, and we do interventions. We help people get into treatment, get into detox, get into rehab. We do recovery coaching. We do what's called sober companion work, where we stay with people in their homes and to help them and support them when they're in early recovery. So I've been doing that for the last 11 years. And even though I'm a native New Yorker, I've branched out to Los Angeles. So I have my company out in LA now. And as I said, it's called Sober Companion Los Angeles. You can find us on the internet. The name of the website is sobercompanionlosangeles.com. And I'm on Instagram at Sober Companion Los Angeles. So people out there in the audience can find me on the internet if your family or any loved ones are suffering from addiction issues, give us a call. We're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're available nationwide. If you guys need help with any kind of issue or just some feedback
Yeah.
on getting help for a family member, yeah, my phone number's on the website. The phone calls come directly to me, and my phone is always on. And
Mm.
I'll do my best to help you guys. If you have any questions about seeking help for a family member or getting help for yourself. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk about my my
Yeah.
company and the services that we offer.
Yeah, it's such a great fit for us, and your story, I loved that we connected on TikTok, and I just felt that this would be such a good message for our siblings because there's a lot of siblings that have lost more than one sibling. There's a lot of siblings that have lost siblings to addiction. And there's a lot of twins out there. So you're going to connect with so many of our folks in the audience that listen. And we're going to put all of the information for your incredible organization in the show notes. So it's really easy for them to access. I'll put your phone number in there, I'll put all of that in there. But I want to ask you a couple things too that I think will help our audience if you don't mind, Tommy.
Sure.
So something that comes up so often with siblings and when they've lost a sibling to addiction, I want to ask you some questions about that, but I also want to ask you some more proactive questions too. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to do some proactive as well. So
Sure.
oftentimes, and you've talked about this in your own story in this episode, oftentimes siblings will ask me, a lot of you guys listening will ask me questions like, well, Maya, like if I had just, gone to my sibling and if I could have just stopped them from drinking, or if I could have just stopped them from using, fill in the blank, right? I could have saved them. I could have saved them. What advice do you give folks like that, Tommy? Because I'm sure, like you mentioned, more with your probably with your brother John, and then as time progressed with Tim, that was also a thing, especially with you being sober, right, for so many years. But I think it's a really wonderful part of your story where you were like, no, Tim wanted to do this on his own. And
Mhm.
what I've heard from so many people over the years is you have to be ready. You have to be ready to embrace sobriety. But I want to hear this from you. Like, what advice would you give siblings that are like, if only I could have just gotten him sober, if only I could have stopped him from doing this or her from doing.
Mhm.
What perspective? You have a much deeper perspective on this. This is what you do. Can you share with us thoughts on that? Because I think it eats people alive after a loss like this.
No, of course, that's a great question. I actually get asked that question a lot. Now, every family dynamic is different. My family dynamic was filled with existing addiction issues. Okay, and my family dynamic was filled with denial about addiction. Okay, now denial is a very common theme in people who have addiction. They deny that they have it. Okay, so in my family background, we didn't talk about our skeletons in the closet, so to speak. Okay, so we danced around that subject of my brother John's addiction, hoping he would grow out of it. And we were waiting for him to hit a bottom. But his bottom was that he died.
Yeah.
When families say we have to wait until he hits a bottom, I don't agree with that. Because if the person is a real addict or an alcoholic, the bottom is death. And it doesn't matter if you are 25 years old or 85 years old. Waiting for an addict to hit bottom to help them is dangerous advice. And I don't give that advice to families. I say, talk about it. Addiction is rooted in isolation. Okay. What's the opposite of isolation? Connection. Talk about what's going on with your family member. Talk about it not in a tough love approach, but in a loving approach.
Hmm.
Okay. But a stern approach. Let them know that you care about them and you love them and you want to help them. Okay. As far as somebody needs to be willing, I can understand that. Okay. They have to have a desire to want to stop. But again, once you have a severe case of addiction, a lot of people lose the ability on whether they can choose to stop or not. They're too physically addicted. They can't stop on their own. They have to go to a hospital or a detox or a treatment center. Okay? Now, if you're talking to your family member and they just say, listen, I have no interest in stopping, then there's really not a lot you can do. Some addicts and alcoholics, they pursue it to the ultimate bottom, which is death. And
Yeah.
it's really sad. You can't force anybody to get sober. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
When you force somebody to get sober, they get resentful, and more times than not, they go back to the addiction. Okay? If they show you some kind of willingness to want to get help, you have to take advantage of that opportunity right away. Because I do interventions all the time.
Yeah.
And if the person has a little bit of willingness, that's when you take them to a detox,
You
take them to
strike
a
while the
hospital.
iron's hot at that moment. That's the
Exactly.
moment. Yeah.
Because that willingness might go away the next day if you wait.
Mhm.
Okay. But again, if your family member is in such dire condition, you might have to just call 911 and take them to a hospital. The day my brother John died, looking back, in a perfect world, we would have just called 911 right away and taken him to a hospital. But
Mhm.
we didn't know. I didn't know at the time how serious it was that day. I
Yeah.
thought he would just sleep it off like he always did, and he'll wake up in a few hours, or he'll wake up tomorrow and he'll be okay. I mean, he won't be okay, but he'll be alive.
Right.
But that day he died, you know? So yeah, as far as the topic of somebody has to want it, I agree with that.
But you're also describing it's not so black and white. There's a balancing act to that too. Like you also, if you're noticing that there's problems in them, you have to act. And like when you see a window of opportunity in a positive way, and
Yeah,
they want it, it's not so black and white. Like they have to want to do it or nothing. Like you're also loving them and caring for them. So it's a lot. It's a lot for the folks that are loving them. So I appreciate you
yeah,
sharing that insight because I
yeah,
think sometimes we don't really know how to balance it. And so you giving that insight that there are, and the fact that you, as your organization, you guys do interventions, it can be, I'm sure those are exceptionally challenging because people are going to react in different ways. I'm sure some people shut down. I'm sure some people are extremely defensive. I'm sure like there's a mix, I would assume, right, Tommy?
Oh, of course. When I do interventions, especially with younger people, like in their 20s, they
Hmm.
can be especially defiant. And when I walk in the room and they see me, they just shut down and they tell me to go away. I don't want your help. And I really feel for the families because, they've reached out to me and my company for help, and I'm trying to help them. But as soon as the person who is affected sees me, they shut down. And I get it. If I was 20 years old and my parents made me quit drinking, I would have been pissed off too, you know.
Right.
But I see that even in older people. So again, you're right what you said about it's not black and white as far as either you have to want to get sober or not. There are gray areas in there, okay? But remember this, and I stress this to family members all the time. If your family member has a real bona fide case of addiction or alcoholism, okay, first of all, it's not a temporary condition. It's not going to go away. Once you have it forever. It's not like some other medical condition where you can take some medicine and be okay and it never comes back. Once you have addiction, it's not going anywhere. And unless you treat it, it's going to get progressively worse. Because I've never seen an alcoholic become a social drinker. I've never seen that.
Hmm.
And I've been around drunks my whole life. I've never seen that. So And again, it doesn't matter if you're 25 or 65. Okay. What matters is that you have a little bit of willingness to ask for help, just a little bit. And I tell people all the time, if you don't want my help, that's okay. If you don't want to see me ever again, that's okay. But if you do want my help in the future, my phone's always on.
Yeah.
you know I wish I could drag people into rehab and detox, but you can't do that. It rarely works. It might
Hmm.
work in the short term, but long-term abstinence is really rooted in a willingness and a desire to stay stopped.
Hmm.
you
Because it's
know
a choice you make every day. It's a choice you've made every day for 31 years.
right, right. All I do is, what I did yesterday to stay sober, I need to do it again today. you know
Yeah.
and I have to stay on top of my recovery program, so to speak, because life on life's terms is going to hit you sooner or later. Like my brother Tim, when he got sick and passed away, you know, that night Tim died was the closest I've come to picking up a drink. I stood outside a bar in Queens, New York, the night Tim died,
Did you really?
and I was
Wow.
crying my eyes out, and I thought I was going to go in that bar and drink. I
It
was having
stopped
this
you.
dialogue with myself.
Yeah.
Tommy, you're about to throw away 26 years of sobriety. And I said, I can't do that. I can't do that to Tim. I can't do that to my family. And I picked up my phone instead and I told people I need help. I was 26 years sober and I said, I need help. And people helped me. So if you're out there and you're in a bad way, it's okay to ask for help. It really is.
Hmm.
If my brother John had told me that day he needed help, you know what I mean?
Could have changed a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let
Yeah.
me ask you this, Tommy, to go into this part of it, because a lot of our siblings that listen, I mentioned this earlier, but they feel so guilty, right? How did you manage that? Because with John, like you didn't know, you went and you and your father pulled him out of the street. Like, how did you manage that guilt over the years? Because I would think, like, logically through the years, you can realize, well, I didn't know. And but a lot of siblings feel so guilty, especially when they found their sibling or, like you did. And there's, oh my God, like, how do you work through that guilt? How do you process that? Because at the end of the day, logically, we can tell ourselves, and we know logically, it's not our fault, right? We didn't give them alcohol or drugs. Like, we didn't have them overdose, right? But we're human and we love our brother or sister who died from this, right? So we feel guilty. Like, if only I had just seen him a little earlier, or if only there's all of that, which can drive us crazy. How
Yeah.
did you work through that? And what advice would you give to other people to work through that?
Well, my story with that is that a few days after my brother John died, my father realized that I was in a bad way.
Yeah.
So my father recommended I talk to a psychiatrist, professional help. I'm a big fan of professional help.
Me too. Hmm.
Okay. I'm not a clinician. I'm a big fan of of advising my clients to get professional help. I did that and I talked to a psychiatrist for months and months after my brother's death. Okay. And I was able to sort out a lot of the issues around the guilt I had. Okay. Now, looking back, okay, my brother John was a great guy. He wasn't a bad person. But when he fell into his addiction, he was sick. He was sick and he paid the ultimate price, which I know that was the last thing he thought would happen to him, as we all did. But for whatever reason, that's the way it happened. And I can't change it. I have to accept the things I can't change,
Hmm.
you know? But as far as sorting through the guilt, I sought out professional help. And later on in my personal recovery program, I was able to do a lot of inventory about my brother John, and and I actually went to the cemetery and I made an amend to him. I spoke to him and I told him that I told him that I missed him and that I was sorry what happened, and I was going to see him again one day,
Yeah.
which I know I will. And it makes that burden of guilt a little bit less. So yeah, getting back to the topic, I would recommend talking to a clinician, talking to even a member of the clergy, if
Mhm.
that's a great thing too. I've
Yep.
done that many times, you know, and they don't charge you anything.
Right, so then there's that too, yeah. I
Yeah.
couldn't agree with you more. I was really curious about your perspective. I could not agree with you more, even though I lost my sibling in a very different way. Tommy, I don't know, I haven't shared this with you, and some of the audience knows this, but my brother struggled with addiction. I always thought that that was gonna be the call I got. It was homicide instead. And I'll never forget, you kind of brought this up as, you were talking this, you brought this memory up in my mind. I'll never forget when my brother's addiction was really bad, and he died at 27 from homicide. But I remember there, when you have someone in your life, is better than me, that struggles with drugs or alcohol and or both, there are moments where it gets really dark, as we've talked about on this episode. And there was a really dark time, and I remember my dad, I went to my dad and I was like, he's bad, dad. Like, we've got, like, he was on the streets, like, it was bad. And there were times when it was like, the up and down. And I remember my dad being pretty in denial about it. My mom was too. They both were in denial about it. So I connect with your story on that for sure. And my dad said, well, Maya, you had issues with drugs and alcohol, which I did. I did in my teenage years, but I've never been an addict. I had issues with it, but I can socially drink now. So I connect with that part too. I was like, wow, like, this is, and I thought for a long time maybe I was an addict, but I saw the difference with my brother and the fact that I'm able to not have it in my life. And that was a journey for me. But I remember telling my dad, I said, yeah, but dad, he's not the same. I was even insightful enough at the time to just know, I was like, this isn't the same. He's like, yeah, he's like, I remember when I went off to college, there was a moment for me. I was very dark. I've been doing a lot of drugs and alcohol. And I was like, I don't want to end up like this. And I just changed. But I knew there was something different in my brother where he was not able to do that. And that's when I was like in my early 20s, and he was young and 3 years younger than me. And I was like, he's an addict. Like, that was my realization of what addiction really was. And so I think I just connected with what you said a couple topics earlier when you were like, well, like, look, like, also it's family dynamics and people recognizing and not recognizing. Both my parents weren't in a place of really, and they've had to kind of work through that themselves as well, because as a result of his addiction, he was definitely around people that weren't great for him. So that's a lot, and that's very intense. And yeah, my brother was not open for help. I don't even know if he ever really realized where he was, but I definitely did. And it's intense. So I just wanted to kind of highlight on that of what you were saying earlier, because that's a moment when you realize that.
It's
Tommy,
very
what?
it's very humbling to admit that you can't help your own family member,
It's
and
hard
it's
though.
really because I know the feeling, that
It's hard.
we throw a word around called powerless in recovery, and
Yeah.
sometimes we are powerless over our family members
Yeah.
to a certain extent, and it's sad that addiction, even after all these years and all the medical advancements and all the fancy rehabs and all this, that people are still dying every day, and if it's not directly through addiction, it's through other things like homicide and drunk driving that are all circled around addiction,
They
and
are.
it's a scourge that's not going away.
Hmm.
And I'm doing my best with me and my company, a little bit at a time, to help families the best we can. Let me just throw in one more thing. I have a 19-year
Please.
old daughter. She's never
Yeah.
seen me drink. Her name is Ava. Hi, Ava. I love
Hi,
you.
Ava. Yeah.
And her mom,
That's awesome.
Christine. And I just want to say a shout out to Jill and Phil. They're on my staff at Sober Companion Los Angeles. What's up, guys? And yeah, this has been a great day. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. And yes, shout out to all of you guys and thank you for doing this amazing work. And I'm just so excited to partner with you guys. And I'm glad you found me, Tommy. Before we remind everyone where they can find you, of course, it's going to be in the show notes. We're going to put it all out there. Anything else I didn't ask you today that you want to share with the audience? You guys are doing really, really important work. So thanks again for sharing all of that.
Well, yeah, the name of the company again is Sober Companion Los Angeles, but we're available nationwide. We'll do international jobs. I've been to Europe. I've been all over, helping people. So if families are in trouble and they want to ask questions or get some feedback, you can find the website at sobercompanionlosangeles.com. I'm on Instagram at Sober Companion Los Angeles. My phone number is on the website. Reach out 24 hours a day. If any siblings out there need some feedback on what they're going through, I'm so glad that I found your channel last year on TikTok. As soon as I saw the title, I was like, holy cow, I got to meet this woman because it's an important topic. It really is. And it makes me feel that I'm not alone in the losses I've had with my two brothers. And you're going to help a lot more people with this platform. So, I appreciate what you do as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy. And we'll put all that information in the show notes. And we're excited to have you in the community. I'm glad you found me too. And thank you for sharing John and Tim with us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks again.
And thank you guys so much for listening to the Surviving Siblings podcast.